help you to gain a competitive edge during turbulent times?
Uh, Good evening. I am Murthy. I actually specialize on advising corporates, particularly SMEs, in terms of reviving them and also turning around them. And I am going to draw from my personal experiences by working with various SMEs. The one thing which he has also collaborated and I would like to stress on is that stay on your core competencies and don't deviate into unrelated diversified areas. Having said that, you should stay lean in an organization. And I have come across various nuances where entrepreneurs do firefighting at the last minute without concentrating on their core competencies, because mismanagement has become a very general rule in corporates, being a small organization as SME. So the point is that invest low on real assets, invest on intellectual property, invest on variable costs, manage your receivables effectively compared to your payables, and last but not least, do what ought to be done by keeping your eyes and ears closer to the ground than what is liked by you.
Right.
That's very important.
Thank you. I think here the message is very clear. So don't develop a herd mentality. Don't go beyond your core competence and get into things that you reckon everybody else is doing. And this is where everybody should go. What Mr. Murthy is telling you is that many companies lose a lot of money in doing that, and especially during turbulent times, one has to be even more prudent. So let your expenses go more towards increasing the variables rather than the fixed. Thank you very much. I think there is a lot that we've managed to learn here in terms of how to build your competitive edge during turbulent times. Let's look at the second strategy now, which was how to predict, how to be a prediction-enabled organization. And for this topic, I think, Michael, there's nobody better than you to tell us how does one predict?
Sure. Hi. We started the business in 2005, and we were servicing the real estate brokers, and we went through the real estate crisis. And what really allowed us to survive through 2009-10 was our business model. The business model was a subscription model that generated recurrent revenues. And I think that is the real strength of our part of the model, is that we're charging on a monthly basis subscription fees to the real estate agents, and we're not trying to get the maximum value on that month. What we're looking at is predictability and longevity of revenues. So that was one element that allowed us to survive.
Excellent. So what you're telling us is that when times are tough, don't just focus on today. Don't put in a lot of time analyzing what it is, but also invest a lot of time in looking at the what if. So do a lot of scenario planning and see how you can adapt or assign your resources towards building that.
So you're always working on different projects, and so you have people working a little bit on this one, a little bit on that one. What's really important to know is what is your core business, and who is needed in your company to sustain that core business, so that if tough time comes along, that you can actually reduce the amount of overcharge that you have. And as an SME, sometimes it's a bit different to say, because you're thinking, okay, if I get rid of these people or this team, they're working on that project and that project. And so identifying really what your core is and what is needed to sustain it.
Got it. Satya, can you develop this a bit more in terms of how this translates to a regular SME that is doing trading in and out on a daily basis?
Yeah, see, as most economies, both Ajay and Craig touched upon that, and so did Michael. We are looking at Dubai and UAE in general, going and taking that next step. The new normal is very different, and that's where the rubber meets the road. How quickly, in an agile way, you can get the product to the consumer. And while I'm a boring banker, but I do go through a whole lot of proposals on a daily basis. And one of the most important things that we pick up as banks to to see how relevant this particular client is going to be, not today, not after 6 months, but after 2 to 3 years. I don't think you can predict longer than that in this world because things are changing so rapidly, but this is something which is very, very important. Some of the triggers that one can look at is, as I think Mr. Murthy mentioned, is to stay the course, understand what your core competencies are, and if you're going to diversify, do it wisely. SMEs usually tend to go sometimes a little overboard. It's a banker's view, of course. And you're looking at profits, you're looking at the swelling of your balance sheet, but you're not looking at cash flows. And those are some of the things which you have to be careful about. But yes, speed, agility, understanding the client, KYC, you say it in a banking term, but a KYC is something which is applicable everywhere. Right. So those are my, two bends on that.
And now to going to the third strategy, which is how to be bottom line driven. And this is the most important factor, I would say, in terms of combating during turbulent times. And Mr. Murthy, can you elaborate a bit on this as to how can an organization be more bottom line driven? What is it that it needs to focus on?
We'll talk about in a broader perspective when we talk about bottom line. A company's finances, you can improve upon your revenue or bring down the costs. When the going is tough, in a turbulent time, you should try to minimize your costs. The cost should be correlated directly to your sales, and unrelated or unproductive costs should be minimized to the extent possible. Keep the organization lean, manage your receivables more effectively. I've come across a case where a company sells on a large basis millions of dirhams, but 70% of their sales is in receivables. The plight of such companies when they are able to sell, but they are not able to recover the cash. The sales has become meaningless when you are not able to collect cash. On the other hand, the company is meticulous in payments because they have to maintain their honor and credibility in the market. So what happens is when the receivables are not flowing in, there is an inbuilt mismatch in the system in terms of cash flows. So you are compelled to borrow at heavier costs outside to meet all your liabilities. That is the starting point of the problem for any company in terms of their financial mismanagement. If you're not able to collect, please don't sell. You should be confident enough to collect your sales. Otherwise, your bottom line will go haywire, and your personal finances also will go into tremendous amount of problems. So I think this is an area where one has to focus. Focus on your core competencies, do sales which are recoverable, minimize the costs, then you will be bottom line oriented. Keep the organization lean and invest less on real assets. Invest only on manpower, intellectual property, and also in variable costs, which is correlated directly to sales. I think this
Got
will
it. Excellent. This was basically you're trying to tell us that, Satya, from your experience, how do SMEs manage their cash flows generally? The ones who come to you asking for loans, when you look at their cash flows, how does it, what do you translate?
In one word, not very well. But that is entrepreneurship. So if you're turning it 4 times in a trade cycle, let's say in a year you're selling something and picking up something and again selling it back, you can do it 4 times, or you can do it 5 times. You know that you've churned it more. Now, I think that is where the cardinal mistake is made, because in tough economic conditions, you are not able to keep your margins. So your revenue is there, you've turned it around 4 times or 5 times, but you've not been able to maintain those margins. But at the same time, you have not been able to take certain costs which are there. Now, if you're not able to meet that margin, let's say 6 months down the road when the food prices came down, and this is a live example that we can talk about, many traders in the market, and we walk the Al Ras market almost every day, they were not able to sell those products because the product price went down. They had turned it around 4 times or 5 times, and the margins were not there. But the shop is there. Mr. Murthy mentioned upon the infrastructure that is there. You have to pay your salaries, you have to feed all those people that are working, your cars are still running. How do you do that? And that is where I think most people felt the pain and the stress, and banks have to be paid, suppliers have to be paid. You're buying from China, you're buying from Malaysia, you're buying from Russia. Those guys are not understanding you that what is happening in this economy. So those are the real issues that are there. Banks may not have been or may have been a part of the problem, but definitely they have to be now a part of the solution. So at Commercial Bank International, very clearly one of the things that we look at is engaging with the client and understanding where the issue is, and therefore the bottom line really makes a difference.
Excellent, got it. Can you insure your receivables? Is it possible? Do banks accept that?
Yes, there are ways to look at managing your receivables better, and again at a bank level we look at clients who have been able to go out and insure receivables. There are companies, the insurance companies, which are available to that, and at a very small cost you can be secured that you remain in business. In fact, the bank will be very happy to look at that receivable financing if that receivable is insured.
Excellent.
And if
Thank
the bank
you.
doesn't want to give you money, go to Greg.
Yes. Craig, you've looked at many balance sheets, because when you decide to finance, would a balance sheet of a traditional economy business, is that very different from a digital knowledge economy business? Like, would Ajay's balance sheet be very different from Michael's?
I think just taking a step back, just on the last point, I think as things get tougher, it's important to make sure that entrepreneurs, business owners know their business, right? And by knowing their business, they know their finances. So if we look at people that will come to Beehive, one of the things where we need to get confidence in is that the entrepreneur actually understands his numbers. And you know, one of the reasons that, one of the major reasons why people understand the numbers is because they tend to keep accounts, or they tend to have that financial discipline around bookkeeping, understanding, what they've got, understanding how much is in receivables, some of the accounting ratios. So that becomes a starting point to actually understand what your liabilities are, what your assets are, what your receivables are, and what your payables are, and you can build a picture quite quickly with that. And from that I think then gives confidence to platforms like ours. It gives confidence to the banks that these people understand their financial situation, and therefore if they are coming for lending facilities, right, they understand why they need that, how long they need it for, what they're going to do with that. Is it short-term financing against short-term investment? Right. Or is it long-term financing for long-term investment? Right. You don't want to mix those two up, because again, you can get a lot of businesses that on a profit scale, they're very profitable businesses. Right. They run out of cash. They've overtraded, it's the end of the business. So I think it's critical that, that discipline, that self-discipline, and when times get a little bit testier, that's actually the time to start doing the good housekeeping and to make sure that you've got a good handle on what you do. So I think that's the first point. The second point is, again, you'll see a lot of initiatives here, and I think it's very welcomed, but you are going to see a shift in the economy of Dubai, the region, as more and more of the economy becomes digital knowledge-based businesses. Right? So the 20-year-olds and the 30-year-olds setting up their businesses, there will be people still setting up traditional businesses, but there'll be an awful lot of businesses, I guess, like mine, like Michael's, we're knowledge digital-based businesses. What does that mean? Well, it means we don't have a lot of assets to collateralize if you're trying to lend. Right. So therefore, again, this comes back to that. If you're four guys sitting in a room with some Apple Macs and you've created an application, or you've created some, you're a digital marketing company, then you have to show that you understand your business. You have to show that you're going to take that money for the right reasons, hire more people, etc. You aren't able to, because you're probably going to rent as well. If you're 28 years old, you probably aren't going to own property here. So I think it's part of this shifting economy, and starting to understand that people aren't going to have necessarily fixed assets which they can just collateralize. So it is important.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I think we all agree that the most SMEs are most vulnerable during turbulent times, and especially in the area of raising funds. It's a tough one, and I think if we all understand how this can be done more prudently, more effectively, and I think that there's a lot that we can develop in terms of our own finance management. Finally, a last, just 2 bits of final advice from each one of you on how can a SME insulate itself from the future shocks.
When you start, whether it's a SME or a bigger company, what you need to see is what you're starting, why you're starting, and what is the end goal. That's very important. So don't look at more short term, look at a long term. And then all these shocks, you have to provide that into the business plan. Not that, I mean, today, it's not now. There was a issue in 2008, there was so every 3-4 years you've got something. So that needs to be taken into consideration. And number 2, don't look at more on where you are sitting at. I mean, SME, I can't go out. Look at beyond the boundaries. That's very important because if this region is doing well, there is the world for you. So I think not only bigger companies can do it, it's all thinking. If you can think, you can go beyond the boundaries. I think you'll have less challenges in the future. So these are 2 important things which I feel.
Very good. Thank you. Michael?
Yeah, eventually the crisis will hit. We are in a very emerging market, and every 3-4 years people get surprised that the market slowed down. Oh my God, it's slowing down, property prices are going down. This is the nature of our market. This is what we operate in. So we have to build that into the business. And what we did at Property Finder, we serve 2 types of customers. We've got the users that come on the site to search for property, and then we've got the businesses, the real estate brokerage that pay a subscription fee. I think on the C side, what allowed us to ring fence, really, like you said, it's to build on the brand and build your brand equity, because this is what will remain during the tough times, and this is what allows you to not spend on marketing and people still come to you. So do that when the times are good, invest in your brand, because your brand equity is what will get you through the crisis. And from the B side, it's really to become an integrated part of the business that you're serving, right? So that you're not just a one-off, but you're part of their day-to-day, they're using your service, and that they embedded your cost part of their P&L, and so that even when you go through crisis, they can't really afford to not list their properties. They need to be there and be visible.
Super.
And so that's what we did at Property Finder.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Satya?
Aziz, it's not all doom and gloom, I think. I mean, looking at my own bank, 19th January 2015, I joined CBI. We relaunched the SME business, and that was just me, one person who joined this company. And today we are 27 people, and I think end of 2016, we are going to be about 45 people. And what are we doing? We are funding SMEs. So clearly there is a strategy over here. The banks understand it, the financial institutions understand it. So